everyone. This is Danielle Daw, Adult Services Librarian at the Halton Hills Public Library. If you're looking for your next book club pick, or maybe just a great summer read, then I have good news for you. The Dewey Divas sat down with us to highlight books you won't want to miss for the summer of 2020. Today we're joined by Rosalyn Steele of HarperCollins Canada. Before we jump to her presentation, don't forget to hit the like button on this video. We'd also love for you to comment down below, telling us which of Rosalyn's books you're most excited about. Now here is Rosalyn.
Hi, I'm Rosalyn Steele from HarperCollins Canada. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Here are my picks for the hidden gems and must-read books from our spring and summer adult list. First up is Almond. This is from our Harper Via imprint, which is focused on publishing extraordinary international authors. This is a debut from filmmaker Wong Pyong-sun. It was published in Korea in 2017, where it sold more than 200,000 copies and was awarded 2 literary awards. This is a great book for anyone for readers who enjoyed The Emissary, Wonder, Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, or The Solitude of Prime Numbers. The main character is a teenage boy named Ji-young Jae, who has a condition called alexithymia, it's a mouthful, that makes it hard for him to understand or feel emotions like fear or anger. He has always struggled to make friends. It has always been enough for him that he is cherished by his mother and grandmother. The apartment that they share above the used bookstore owned by the family is his sanctuary. His life is forever changed by a random act of violence on his 16th birthday that leaves his grandmother dead and mother incapacitated. Under the supervision of a neighbor, he is left to live alone in the apartment and continue on with both school and the running of the store. At school, he meets a new student, Gun, who's a bully. No matter how poorly Gun treats Ji-young Jae, he doesn't react. Gun respects that. He feels too much, and as a result, lashes out at everyone. The friendship that develops between the 2 boys changes them in both very unexpected ways. The writing in Almond is lovely. It's a short novel, but you'll find yourself slowing down to savor this engaging story about belonging and acceptance. It would also be a great YA crossover for mature teens. So Daughters of Smoke and Fire by Ava Homan is my next title. The Toronto Star just published a rave review of this, calling it a gripping and enlightening read. This is an Own Voices novel of a Kurdish woman's struggle to survive in Iran and her eventual journey to Canada. The main character, Lila, is an aspiring Kurdish filmmaker in Iran who wants to bring the stories of her people to the attention of the world. Her brother, Chia, after the imprisonment and torture of their father, has become an activist trying to gain the Kurdish people's status in a country that won't even allow them to speak their own language. When Chia disappears in Tehran, Lila becomes desperate to find him and eventually publishing some of his writing and becoming a target herself. It's beautifully written, emotional, and heartbreaking. This is a powerful, immersive book that will stay with you long after you are finished reading it. It will make you mad. It will make you cry. It's perfect for book clubs. I definitely recommend this one to readers of The Kite Runner, The Boat People, A Woman Is No Man, or Half of a Yellow Sun. My next title is 5 Little Indians by Michelle Good. This is a debut from a Canadian author, Michelle Good, and the manuscript for this book won the UBC Fiction Prize. Michelle is a member of the Red Pheasant Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, and 5 Little Indians is a very timely and hard-hitting read for fans of Richard Wagamese and Joseph Boyden, telling the story of Indigenous children taken away from their families and sent to a residential school on the West Coast. Children were stripped of their community, their culture, their family, and ultimately their identity. There have been a lot of books written about the experiences of children sent to such schools, but not as many focus on what happened to them when they aged out of the system. When they graduated, they were basically given just a bus ticket to Vancouver. They had no social or financial assistance for the transition back to a society that is often very hostile to them. And you can only imagine how overwhelming a city the size of Vancouver must be for these young kids who had never known anything but the reservation and school. So the book follows 5 survivors as they try to make their way in the world, many ending up in Vancouver's Lower East Side, victims of predators and addiction, leading to poverty and incarceration. It is a dark book at times, but there are moments of love, spirituality, and hope, particularly near the end as some of the characters find each other, rediscover their roots, fight for justice, and slowly start to heal the wounds of the past. It's a very powerful read with lots to discuss. My next book is The German Heiress by Anika Scott. This is World War II historical novels seem to be a bottomless well for the ravenous readers who have made bestsellers out of books like The Tattooist of Auschwitz, The Lost Girls of Paris, The Alice Network, The Woman in the Castle, and The Lilac Girls. So the German Heiress is told from the perspective of a German woman, so it's a little bit different than the books out there. It shines a spotlight on an experience that we don't often hear about in World War II fiction in a sympathetic, enlightening way. It's the story of Clara Falkenberg, who was once Germany's most eligible and acclaimed heiress, earning the nickname the Iron Fräulein during World War II for her role in operating her family's ironworks empire. The book opens 2 years after the war has ended, when Clara is living under a false identity and hiding from the British, who want her to join her father in prison, where he is being held for war crimes. She, on the other hand, is trying to track down her friend Elisa, who was the only one to know the truth about her efforts to help the Jews that her father helped transport to camps, as well as the forced laborers the factory was ordered to take on during the war. This novel is a true page-turner, blending an intriguing cat-and-mouse chase with an emotional story of female friendship, dark family secrets, and a juicy romance. The author perfectly captures the time period in vivid detail, packed with lots of little-known facts about post-war Germany, and has created an unforgettable cast of characters, from Clara, the strong female heroine, hell-bent on discovering the truth, to Jacob, the droll and charismatic young man who catches her eye and ultimately helps her, as well as the cunning British officer determined to find justice. So perfect for book clubs. The moral questions raised by the main character's ties to Nazi Germany and her complex family history would make for a very lively discussion. And for those who like to know these things, this was published in the UK under the title Finding Clara. My next book is The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. Alka emigrated to California from Rajasthan with her parents when she was 9. Her debut novel is inspired by imagining the life that her traditional mother might have had she had not been in an arranged marriage. The main character is Lakshmi Sastry, and the book opens when she is 15 and fleeing an arranged marriage to an abusive older man. She runs away from her rural village to Jaipur, where against all odds, she carves out a living for herself as a henna artist, and becomes friends and confidant to wealthy upper caste women. Surviving by her wits and talents, she shares her knowledge and keeps their secrets in a delicate balancing act amid the changing social structure brought upon by Indian independence. The author traveled to the area in India where her mother grew up, did tons of interviews with women there, and documented her research on a blog, which you can find at thehennaartist.com. So this was recently picked as a Reese Witherspoon Hello Sunshine Book Club pick, and it's just fantastic with great female characters, nice diverse cast, and lots to discuss. Next up is The Imperfects by Amy Meyerson. This is a new book from the author of The Bookshop of Yesterday. It blends fact, history, and imagination into a very entertaining family story. So after the death of family matriarch Helen Miller, her daughter Deborah and grandchildren Beck, Ashley, and Jake reunite to divide her estate. Beck, who was the closest to Helen, was left a brooch with a large yellow stone in it. She assumes it's glass, but the whole family is blown away when they discover that the brooch contains the Florentine diamond. So the Florentine diamond is a giant 137-carat yellow gem once owned by the Medici family, which later became part of the Habsburg crown jewels. It was last seen after the fall of the Austrian Empire after World War I and was rumored to have been stolen and recut. How did this lost treasure end up in Helen's possession? The investigation leads the estranged members of the family to realize how very little they knew about their grandmother's past and towards a truth that brings them together and forever transforms their lives. The dysfunctional family reminded me a lot of the family from The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. So the author did a great amount of research in creating this story, which is documented at the back of the book. I love reading about how the author came up with ideas. Really fascinating stuff. My next book is The Library of Legends by Janie Chang. I loved this book. Janie is based in Vancouver. It is a truly transporting read that I found impossible to put down. It's the third book in a very loosely connected trilogy, but you definitely don't have to have read the first 2 books in order to read and love this one. I think there's only one overlapping character. Set in 1937, as the Japanese invasion of China forces thousands to flee to escape the falling bombs. When Nanking is attacked, 19-year-old Lian and her classmates at Minghua University are ordered to flee to the western provinces, which is a 1,000-mile walk over treacherous territory. Students, staff, and faculty have also been entrusted with the school's treasure, a collection of 500-year-old encyclopedias containing the country's myths and folklore, called the Library of Legends. Lian, a scholarship student, is worried about her mother, who is living in an area ravaged by bombing, and she hasn't been able to get in touch with her. She finds herself growing close to Liao Xiaoming, a wealthy male classmate, and drifting apart from her female friend, who has become caught up in the thrall of a charismatic student who is recruiting for the Communist Party. When the Communist is murdered and a teacher threatens Lian with a secret she has been hiding about her father, she decides to leave the group and heads for Shanghai, where she has recently discovered her mother was heading. Accompanying her on the journey to Shanghai are Liao and his maidservant Sparrow, who Lian discovers has a unique connection to the Library of Legends and is leading a very different exodus going on under the cover of war. So it's inspired by true historical events. It's a magical story of eternal love, immortals, war, history, and sacrifice. And again, it will truly transport you to a different time and place. Next up is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a debut with a huge amount of buzz behind it. It's definitely a book that demands and deserves to be read and talked about. It's the most astonishing, challenging, upsetting, and profoundly moving debuts in many a season. It's about Vanessa, a 15-year-old who is enrolled at a private school, who embarks on a love affair with Jacob Strain, her 42-year-old English professor. Years later, another student from the same school accuses Jacob of sexual abuse and wants Vanessa to testify against him. The novel is told in then and now segments as Vanessa's affair unfolds and as Vanessa starts to suspect that her great love story might not be as quite as it seemed at the time. It's not just a suspense novel, it's an incredibly compulsive and psychological read. She touches on nearly every single layer and issue surrounding sexual abuse that we're wrestling with today, from manipulation and consent to agency, complicity, and victimhood. But she does it with exceptional subtlety and nuance. This is literature at its finest and would be an amazing pick for book clubs. She started writing these characters remarkably when she was 16 years old, inspired by her own teenage experience with older men. She's now in her early 30s and has spent her entire adult life as a struggling writer and academic. So this has gotten starred reviews from right across the board, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful read. Next up is Separation Anxiety by Laura Zigman. Laura is the best-selling author of Animal Husbandry, which was adapted into the movie Someone Like You, starring Ashley Judd and Hugh Jackman, as well as the book Dating Big Bird. After a 10-year hiatus from fiction, she's back with another hilarious novel, and we're really thrilled to have this on our list. So I'm always being asked for book club recommendations that are substantial enough for good discussion, but also funny, and Separation Anxiety definitely lives up to that description. It's about a middle-aged woman named Judy who feels as though she is losing control of her life. Her career is in a lull. She can't afford to divorce her pot-addicted husband. Her 13-year-old son is increasingly distant, and her best friend is dying. One day she finds her old baby sling while she's cleaning and decides to wear the family dog Charlotte in the sling to feel connected to something again. So wearing your dog around is probably not the best coping mechanism, but it seems to work for Judy. So this book is funny and relatable. It's the perfect antidote to our times, a very approachable story about a woman rediscovering what she loves about her marriage, her family, and herself. Next up is Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. This is a new book from my favorite horror writer, Paul Tremblay. His writing sucks you right in with stories that grab your attention and then plunge you right into action, drama, and suspense. And for those who don't like horror, the horror elements kind of sneak in when you aren't expecting it, and by that point, it's far too late to stop. You are too invested in the characters. Survivor Song is no exception. It was written long before COVID-19 was on our minds, but seems terrifyingly plausible now that we are in the midst of this pandemic. In this book, an extremely contagious rabies-like virus is spreading like wildfire in the state of Massachusetts. It is spread by saliva, has an extremely short incubation period, and turns its victims into killers, driven to attack and bite others before they succumb to the illness. The state is in lockdown to try to prevent the spread. There is a vaccine, but those are in short supply, and getting to the hospital for a shot is like traveling through a war zone as society breaks down and the government finds it harder to maintain control. The main characters in this book are a mild-mannered pediatrician named Romola or Rams Sherman and her friend Natalie. Natalie is 8 months pregnant and gets infected with this illness, trying to save her husband from an attacker. She calls Rams, desperate for a ride to the hospital. A vaccine is the only hope she and her baby have of surviving. But will they make it there with so many obstacles in the way, and can they get there in time before Natalie succumbs and attacks Rams? So this book is all the more terrifying with the author's scarily accurate predictions about how such a disaster would unfold and how the public would react. You'll recognize a lot of things that you see on the news these days in this book. It is all the more personal by keeping the scale small. It's not about the worldwide effect of the virus, it's about the effects that it's having on this family, this friendship. It's really unputdownable. Next up is The War Widow by Tara Moss. So if you're a fan of the TV show or the novels, the Miss Fisher mysteries, you definitely have to pick up this book. The War Widow is by Canadian author Tara Moss. She's from Vancouver originally, but lived in Australia for years, where she was both a top-ranked model and thriller writer. She's recently moved back to Vancouver, and this is the first in what will be a historical mystery series featuring the fantastic PI and former World War II journalist Billy Walker. With her husband declared missing in action during the war and journalism jobs going back to men returning from the battlefields, Billy decides to reopen her dad's Sydney-based PI firm. Her new case involves the missing son of a Jewish couple who have built up a successful company after the war, but are hiding from the past. As Billy investigates, she uncovers connections between her case and to Nazi war criminals. Over the course of the book, she also cracks open a case of Aboriginal girls being forced into sexual slavery, butts heads with a distractingly attractive local police detective, and finds her life on the line several times. So this book is delightfully distracting. So if you like a good, impeccably researched historical mystery, do check this one out. For book clubs too, there is some substantial issues in the books that that are good for discussion as well. Next up, we have The Woman Before Wallis. This is a debut from Toronto-based author Bryn Turnbull, perfect for anyone who loves The Crown. The Woman Before Wallis tells the story of the woman who was with Prince Edward before Wallis Simpson. Thelma Morgan, the twin sister of the first Gloria Vanderbilt, was married to a viscount after a whirlwind romance and immersed into life as a member of the British aristocracy. Her life seemed like a fairy tale and became even more so when her husband introduced her to Edward, Prince of Wales, and she falls into a long-term love affair with him. But when her beloved sister gets embroiled in a custody scandal back home, Thelma decided to leave Edward, sailing back to New York to be with her. And she left Edward in the care of her best friend, Wallis Simpson. I think we all know what happened next with Edward and Wallis. Wallis is famous as the woman for whom King Edward abdicated his throne. Thelma Morgan's story is less well known, but every bit as fascinating. The custody trial for little Gloria Vanderbilt, who grew up to be designer Gloria Vanderbilt and the mother of journalist Anderson Cooper, was a media firestorm that has now been mostly forgotten. Both stories provide shocking insight into the social wars of the privileged. This is the perfect, juicy, page-turning historical fiction novel for summer reading. Next up, I have some of my favorite nonfiction titles that I thought would work for both general interest reading and book clubs alike. First up is the Book of Eels, which the author described as himself as strange and nerdy in a profile that the New York Times just did on him about the success of this book internationally. This was a bestseller in Sweden, where it was originally published. It won the August Prize, the country's most prestigious literary award, and has now been translated and sold around the world. It blends nature writing with an engaging father-son story, and it is perfect for fans of The Hidden Life of Trees or H is for Hawk. Eels are fascinating and elusive creatures. They are born in the Sargasso Sea, move to freshwater, then return to the sea to spawn and die. But their biology has captivated and baffled some of the greatest minds throughout history, from Aristotle to Freud. much is still unknown about them, which is a rare thing in today's information-obsessed world. The author's father would take him fishing as a child, and it is from his dad's stories that the younger Svensson became fascinated by eels. However, it wasn't until his father's death from cancer that he decided to try his own hand at researching. As he said in the New York Times interview, "I wouldn't have written this book if my father hadn't died. It is a book about science and science history, but it's also a way for me to try to write my way back to my own origin, to my own Sargasso Sea." So the book alternates between memories of the father and their nighttime fishing trips and natural history chapters. One of my favorite parts of the book is it looks at how eels are portrayed in myths and legend. For example, Australian researchers recently proposed that the Loch Ness Monster was in fact an eel. So a fascinating blend of microhistory and a father-son story. Next up is Memorial Drive. This is a memoir from former U.S. Poet Laureate and Pulitzer Prize-winning author Natasha Trethewey about her childhood and the murder of her mother by her former stepfather. Natasha's story is riveting and hard to look away from. You are gripped from the moment you start reading, as Natasha describes the grisly picture of the crime at the center of this book. At the same time, we also come to understand how this singular act of domestic violence points to a larger narrative about race and violence in the U.S., something that is unfortunately very topical at this moment. The writing is beautiful, as you would expect from a poet, not a word wasted. This book definitely has award potential and is perfect for readers of Fugitive Pieces or Angela's Ashes. Next up is Open House, A Life in 32 Moods by Jane Christmas. Jane is a noted Canadian memoirist, with 3 books to her credit. Her past books featured her adventures hiking the El Camino Trail, traveling with her eccentric mother across Europe, and taking a turn in a nunnery. So she's quite funny. Open House documents Jane's long case of real estate lust, a compulsive need to seek out, buy, renovate, and then move on to a new house. So on the average, people in the UK move about 3 times in their lives. Canadians move an average of 7 times, and Americans move 11 times. Jane Christmas has moved 32 times, which, as she points out in her hilarious introduction, is more than her number of lovers. Jane grew up in Toronto and Hamilton with a mom who had the same habits. Her mom actually once bought a house without the dad knowing, and her dad would often threaten to throw himself in front of a subway if they moved again. She vowed that she wouldn't be the same, but then again, here she is 32 houses later on her 3rd marriage to an Englishman who hates moving and is trying and desperately trying to fix up her new house, which is kind of like the Waterloo of house renovations. She just can't seem to get anything done. So if real estate makes your heart beat faster, this is the book for you. Readers of Plum Johnson's They Left Us Everything should also really enjoy this. My last book is Wine Girl, The Obstacles, Humiliations, and Triumphs of America's Youngest Sommelier by Victoria James. This reads like a nonfiction sweet bitter. It blends a gripping and heart-wrenching personal story with a fascinating peek into the little-known aspects of the fine dining world. It reads rather like a blend of Tara Westover's Educated meets Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. You'll see on your screen 2 jackets. One is the hardcover jacket, and the one with the wine glass made out of corks is the paperback jacket, which I love. The book opens with Victoria as a child. Her mother suffered from depression and would often leave the children to fend for themselves while her husband was away on business trips. Eventually, her father took the kids and left in a really heart-wrenching scene, but he too had his issues. He became an alcoholic and was extremely controlling. Victoria got her first job at 14 at a local diner, where she learned that the 2 most important people to befriend at a restaurant were the cook and the dishwasher, a piece of advice that has served her well throughout her career. She was sadly raped by a customer at that first job while still a teenager. She never told anyone about the attack, but struggled to put it aside as she went from job to job, eventually becoming interested in wine and training to become the U.S.'s youngest sommelier. During her professional career, she also faced sexism, assault, and other challenges that will be familiar to many of the women who have worked in the food service industry. The Wine Girl is a fast-paced, moving, and beautifully told story from a reader who is completely engaging on the page. You really won't be able to put this one down. That is my list. Thank you very much.
What did you think of Rosalyn's picks? Leave us a comment to share your favorite titles. And don't forget to join us in the next video to learn about more great titles from the Dewey Divas.